The film opens with a note explaining that in the year 1665, the plague was sweeping through England and nearby regions. Millions were dying from this devastating disease. In the midst of this horror, religious fanatics began blaming the plague on demonic forces and used it as an excuse to accuse thousands of innocent women of witchcraft. Most were brutally executed. Cut to the present day, we meet Grace, a woman with pain etched deeply on her face. Beside her is her innocent young daughter, Abby. When Grace steps outside her home, we finally learn the cause of her heartbreak. Her husband, Joseph, has taken his own life. Overwhelmed with grief, she begins digging his grave with her own hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Flashback. Not long ago, Grace, Abby, and Joseph were living a quiet, simple life. Fearing the plague, they had moved into a rented house far away from the city. Joseph would go into town to sell their farm's crops and would sometimes stop by a bar for a drink. One day at the bar, he has a chance encounter with their landlord, Boomer. After Boomer leaves, Joseph realizes something chilling. He had been drinking with a man infected by the plague. Horrified, Joseph races back home, visibly shaken. As his condition begins to deteriorate, he begs Grace to fetch herbs from the forest. Then, without warning, he hangs himself, desperate to keep the disease from spreading to his family. Back to the present. Boomer arrives at Grace's home with his servant, Edwin, demanding the rent. Grace pleads for more time and then sets out for the city, tying Abby close to her as they walk. Along the way, she runs into an old friend, Kate, and her husband, Ben. Grace entrusts Abby to Kate for safekeeping. In the city, Grace visits the bar to ask the owner for a loan. He refuses, but then drops a bombshell. Boomer had intentionally swapped Joseph's drink, knowing it was contaminated. Joseph was set up. Why Boomer did this is still a mystery. That night, Grace lies awake, terrified. Boomer is coming back in the morning to collect the rent. Suddenly, Joseph's ghost appears and tells her to sell his wedding ring. Heartbroken, Grace digs up his grave and retrieves the ring. The next day, Boomer returns with Edwin. Grace offers him both her own ring and Joseph's wedding band, hoping it will cover the rent. But Boomer has something far more sinister in mind. He tries to assault her. Grace fights back. She burns his hand with a red-hot iron rod and forces him out at gunpoint. Boomer stumbles away, vowing revenge. "You'll pay for this, I swear it." Alone, Grace talks to Joseph's spirit, revealing the trauma of her past. How as a child she watched her mother get captured by a notorious witch hunter named Moorcroft. Her mother was tortured without cause. When she refused to confess, they threatened to kill young Grace. To save her daughter, the woman falsely admitted to being a witch. She was burned alive in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Boomer is back at the bar, stirring up the townsfolk. He claims Grace is a witch. After all, her husband died of the plague, but she never got sick. And when he went to collect rent, she attacked him. The drunken crowd, already on edge after recently executing a woman named Molly for witchcraft, turns against Grace. Molly had been Grace's friend. The mob turns to the witch hunters. At home, Grace is putting Abby to bed when masked intruders break in. She rushes upstairs to hide, but they set the house on fire. Grace barely escapes, only to be captured by Boomer. They take Abby and throw Grace in jail. Elsewhere, Kate confronts Ben. "Why would you betray Grace? She's not a witch." Ben slaps her and says coldly, "If I hadn't sided with Boomer, we'd be next." In jail, Grace meets a teenage orphan named Astrid, imprisoned for stealing food. Astrid warns her, "They'll torture you until you confess, and once you do, they'll kill you. Don't give up." The next morning, Grace is dragged into the town square and tied to a post. She's whipped across her back, blood soaking through her dress, but not a single tear falls. Her tormentors call it a day, for now. Later, Boomer tells Edwin that Moorcroft is personally coming to torture Grace. If she'd just given in back then, Boomer sneers, none of this would be happening. Grace glares at him through the cell bars. "I'd rather die than give in to you." That night, Grace pleads with Edwin to find Abby. Moved, Edwin sneaks out to search for the girl. As soon as he's gone, Boomer returns, this time with Moorcroft and his assistant, Leonora. Moorcroft leans in. "Tomorrow, your hell begins." Later that night, Grace dreams she's being hunted by the devil. She begs God for help, and suddenly her mother appears in the vision. "Don't forget who you are," her mother says. "Fight." At dawn, a guard throws water on Grace to wake her. Moorcroft orders Leonora to inspect her for signs of witchcraft. Leonora rips her clothes and examines her body. Eventually, she points to an old scar on Grace's neck. Moorcroft nods with satisfaction. The devil's mark. The torture will now begin, until she confesses to being a witch. Grace is imprisoned in the same horrific condition. A while later, Edwin shows up and tells her that Boomer has locked Abby up with a nurse. Hearing this, Grace firmly declares that Abby must be rescued. She can't stay in Boomer's hands any longer. She pleads with Edwin to save her. But before he can respond, guards arrive and he's forced to leave. The next day, Grace is tied to a wooden post for torture. Moorcroft appears with his assistant, Leonora, and begins punishing Grace in a fit of rage. But despite the unbearable pain, Grace remains silent and endures it. That night, she's thrown back into her cell. During this time, Leonora tells Moorcroft that she doesn't believe Grace is a witch. Moorcroft coldly replies, if she truly isn't, then God will save her, just like he saved you. We learn that Moorcroft had once accused Leonora of being a witch and tried to burn her, but she survived when it suddenly started to rain. Later, Leonora visits Grace and tells her, just admit you're a witch. If you are, then God will save you. It becomes clear that Moorcroft has completely brainwashed her, but Grace urges Leonora to leave that place. The next day, Grace is once again tied to the wooden post. Moorcroft gives her one last chance to confess. But Grace, unwavering, says she isn't weak like her mother. She won't lie just to survive. Moorcroft then reveals a terrifying device. With the push of a button, sharp blades pop out. He inserts it into Grace's private parts and she screams in agony, but still refuses to lie. Everyone there is stunned. No ordinary person could endure such inhuman torture. Moorcroft declares her a witch, saying no human could have survived that. He then announces that both Grace and Abby will be burned alive the next day. Grace begs him to at least spare Abby, but Moorcroft is cold and unrelenting. Meanwhile, Kate, traveling with Ben, vows to expose the truth to the villagers, that Grace isn't a witch, even if it means she dies too. Ben, enraged, throws her off the horse and starts beating her, but Kate doesn't back down. She fights back, knocks Ben to the ground, and hits the horse with a rock. The frightened horse bolts, and Ben's head slams into a rock, killing him instantly. That night, Edwin sneaks food to Grace, and she convinces him to help her escape. Edwin then goes to Moorcroft and tells him Grace wants to speak with him. Curious, Moorcroft orders her to be cleaned up and brought to him. Grace is reunited with Abby, and her face lights up at the sight of her. Edwin soon arrives with a bottle of wine, secretly poisoned. Moorcroft sends everyone away and starts drinking with Grace, trying to pressure her into confessing. Grace knows the wine is poisoned, but she drinks it anyway. She knows she's going to die tomorrow, but she's determined to take Moorcroft with her. Seizing the moment, she lashes out and stabs both of Moorcroft's hands to the table, pinning him down. Meanwhile, Abby is locked in Boomer's room. A drunk Boomer stumbles in and passes out. Edwin sneaks in and tries to rescue her, but she starts crying. Before Boomer can react, Edwin knocks him out cold. At the same time, Leonora attacks Grace. A violent fight breaks out. Grace punches her hard in the face, and the struggle turns so intense that the room catches fire. Moorcroft, still nailed to the chair, watches helplessly as the chaos unfolds. Edwin arrives and helps Grace escape. Before leaving, she sets a gun in front of Moorcroft. Outside, Edwin gets Abby to safety, while Grace locks herself in a room, convinced she's been poisoned. But Edwin reveals the truth. The poison wine wasn't for her. Boomer drank it. Realizing this, Grace tries to flee, but a guard blocks her way. She urges Edwin to run and save himself. Later, just as Grace is about to free the other prisoners, Boomer shows up and attacks her. A savage fight breaks out, and Grace ultimately slits Boomer's throat, making him pay for everything he did. In the final scenes, Moorcroft is seen pulling the blades out of his hands. He grabs the gun Grace left and tries to shoot himself to escape the flames. But when he pulls the trigger, nothing happens. The gun is empty. Now, he has no choice but to face the fire. Elsewhere, Grace imagines the spirit of Joseph and walks toward a well, then jumps in. Morning comes. Edwin brings Abby safely to Kate. And finally, we see Grace, sword in hand, rising from a river, and that's where the film ends.